PlayStation 5. Very interesting one. I've never seen one with these custom covers before. That's kind of cool. Let me show you what's going on. And you guessed it, ripped off fan connector. I've never seen one with a black header on there. Our job is going to be to put that back on. So I'm going to have to disassemble and we'll go from there. This video is brought to you by PCB Way. We'll talk about their awesome services in a little bit. This one you gotta watch out for two cables. The ribbon cable on this one is actually hidden under the black, whereas some of the other versions you can actually access that cable right here. I haven't seen this shield before. Interesting, we have to peel this off. Looks like we're dealing with a little bit of a different layout than what we're used to seeing. So let's switch to microscope and take a look. So we have this line we need to reconnect, but it also looks like we need to make a connection here. So this provides an interesting conundrum. We may have to run two jumpers and wrap them both around the pin. It's the same line, so I'm not worried about them like shorting together or anything. This is ground, I've already measured, and this is another line. We'll have to rebuild the pad on that one. Our ground pads are still here, so that's good. So jumper, pad. We'll have to get it right the first time because I don't want to use hot air around this connector. We'll run the long jumper and a short jumper, wrap it around the pin. We'll create a new pad here because we can solder it on both sides, and we'll create a new pad here to solder on. It doesn't have to be particularly big. This is not a ground line. We'll need to make sure we're not bridging it anywhere except here. Have to be a little bit precise. Probably going to tear away some of this loose stuff. Cut it away anyway. Well, let's do some grinding. Grind off this loose stuff here. Just want this via. We may end up having to run from that capacitor or this test pad. Just don't have anything to work with over here, and I don't really want to solder to an 0102 component. I mean, if we have to, we can solder to that capacitor. It's just not something I really want to do. Interesting layout here. This is all ground. Enough of it to solder to both sides. We're only going to be able to solder one side of our new pad down here. We'll make do though. We're prepared to tin it up. In order to tin it up and begin our soldering work, I will have to turn on my equipment. And while I turn on my equipment, let me throw up my expected temperatures for this job. These temperatures are brought to you by the associate links in the description. If you go to my video description and click on one of these links and buy any of this equipment, a small portion of that purchase will go to supporting the channel. And I greatly appreciate you. It won't cost you an extra dime. Let's add some flux. Flux is also in the description under consumables. 10 6337 Kester solder. Some indirect lighting here, less glares. We'll work the pads first. We need one somewhat slim one here for the middle. Maybe a little slimmer. Could be about right. We want it a little shorter as well. Should be just about right. Flip it around. Pre-tin it. Flip it back over. Reasonably close to in place. Alright, I think that's going to be real solid. I need to measure out one for this. Let's see how we did. Yeah, that just will work out just about right. Let's pretend. Solder on. I don't mind if it makes contact with that capacitor. Okay, I think we're going to clean these and try to get all this adhesive off first before we deal with the jumpers. The jumpers will limit our ability to scrub. We can get pretty liberal with the scrubbing right now, as long as we don't knock off parts. Much better. Now we got some tricky stuff to do. See what sort of wire we want to run. Some larger stuff. I'd say it's probably going to be okay. So make sure we have a good blob there. Now we need to pre-tin our wire. We switch to our Inesi tweezers. They handle wire just better than any other tweezer, in my opinion. Flux on this. And we're just kind of scraping and burning the enamel away. I would like this wire to be a little straighter. I don't need any weird curving going on here. Okay, that's a nice joint. And what we're going to do is just run this long, because we will be soldering it to the pin of the connector. We'll do a wrap on it. I may need to run a thinner one here. Trying to solder that bigger wire onto something that small would be a challenge. So we're just going to run a thinner one. Don't think it'll make too much of a difference. Change this one. It's going to be a little bit fiddly. Not a lot of area to solder. And we definitely don't want to accidentally knock off this part. Okay. It is soldered on. And again, we'll leave plenty of wire. Now we need to clean. We don't have to clean up as much because we already did some scrubbing here. We just need to clean off the flux on these two spots. We will be solder masking things down. Grab our ultrasonic. Get in here. Try everything off. Don't want them to come off or move. And we'll cure it really well. And these things won't move an inch. Particularly, we don't want them getting sucked up into the connector, because the surface tension can work for or against you. And we're trying to make it work for us. Not be the prettiest thing ever. I'd like to get some clear coat of this type stuff. If anybody knows where I can find the clear stuff, link me or message me. I think the clear stuff would just look better. Like I always say, if you want pretty, don't rip your connector off the board. I'm going to set our UV lamp on there and walk away and let it get a good cure for about 10 or 15 minutes and go from there. PCB Way offers many great services, like PCB with many options, ranging from standard to rigid flex, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing, and injection molding, PCB assembly, and they even have their own store with many great deals. Click my link in the description and head over to PCBWay.com and start your project today. And we're back, and I do believe we are well cured at this point. Now we need to clean up the connector, these old pads off. Just real quick, I just want to make sure we can solder that pin on. I think we've got plenty of space to do that. Let's tin up our new pads. Some flux. Switch to our micro pencil. Ground pads are going to be the more challenging. There's just not a lot of space here to solder. Feed some solder in here. Really get it in there. Okay. Oh yeah, we're solid. Flux over our 2 pins. And we can flux up all 3 really. Keep these 2 guys down first. Then we'll deal with the wire. Solid. Okay. Now a little bit tricky part. Getting this first one wrapped around. And then the second one. Without breaking anything. Might have to get a couple of wraps out of it. Let's grab our other wire. Ideally we'll solder all this at the same time. At least a few wraps on him as well. If we can. A little more challenging with the wire already on there. One wrap may have to do. We'll try it though. Get this soldered on. Clean. And then we need to make sure we're getting connection, at least to that test pad. Check and make sure we're getting from this test pad to this pin, and we are solid. Excellent. Okay, and I am picking up the board with the connector. I would say that is pretty solid. We're going to give it a thorough clean off camera because I want to make sure there's no flux in these other connectors that are nearby. And then we'll deal with our liquid metal and go from there. Well, let's deal with this dry spot here. Let's get some of this pulled stuff. Gently put it back on. Not doing this any good in the foam. Let's see if we can get it to rub in. We gotta be a little bit liberal with it. Don't be afraid. Once you get the oxidization off, it will start rubbing in. You'll notice immediately when it starts doing so. Be patient. It will eventually do so. Dry spot hiding under here. And harder over here than it was in the dry spot. There we go. We'll have to re-grab some more of our liquid metal. I'd be really surprised if any of the next generation consoles use this stuff. It is better than most thermal compounds, but at what price? If that's good on the CPU, let's look at the heatsink. See if we can address this. Most of it off to the side. That'll work. Now we need to reassemble enough to test and make sure our fan works. I hope you're getting value out of this video. Just a reminder, if you find you're not ready to tackle this, I do offer these services, both locally and mail-in. Just head over to micromage.repair, click free quote, fill out the form, and I'll get back to you personally. If you mention this video, I'll give you 10% off on your repair. Alright, moment of truth. I think we're hooked up enough to see if our fan is working. I see fan spin. Okay, and as you can see in the top left, we're powered up and back up and running. Excellent. Just make sure everything's still happy before we put the cover back on. And everything looks good. Excellent. So that one was a little different. It is a 1215A, which is a little different than all the other disc editions I've seen. If you got value out of this video, I think you'll get value out of this one, and I'll see you there. Until then, peace, love, and solder wick.